under arrest for stuff you didn't do yet. Send the precogs. We got to get them ready. They got to be trained up so that they can arrest people for crimes that they have not yet committed, but they could potentially commit in the future. This is where we're going, folks. Welcome to the channel.
My king's coming back, that's what I'm banking on. Bleed and celebrate the grace of...
Welcome to Canada. Thanks for coming back. We are talking about a new bill that has come out, the Online Harms Act, Bill C-63, which is just another bill in the long line of bills. Bill C-11, Bill C-18, Bill C-4, which was one that has some controversy because it's very one-sided. And then there's the Emergencies Act, of course, with the trucker convoy. And now this new one that came out February 26th that was announced by Arif Virani, the Justice Minister of Canada, who announced it. And it is over the top dystopian. Let me just say it's not all bad. Okay, so there's some good parts in it, things that we can all agree with. It lumps in good things like protection for children against child exploitation, pornography, material that's bullying or harmful or abusive that's directed at children via screens of all types on social media apps and, in other places online. Things that most common sense Canadians would agree with. We need to be cracking down and pushing towards crackdown on that. And it also appears to have some potential to hit hard in a woke direction currently, but equally hard in an anti-woke direction. And I'll explain that later when public opinion sways and the government is changed out, which is happening right now. So with increased common sense, there is going to be an ability to use this law, if it ever gets that far, against the woke agenda for the harms that it is currently committing and pushing onto our children. So I'll explain that portion of it later. But the problem with this whole bill, Bill C-63, and we're going to take a look at a bunch of different views on it, is that it also attempts to legislate against a yet to be defined type of hate, as well as terrorism and any type of calls to genocide, which is also very vague, with provisions for anonymous reporting. And this is where it gets really dystopian. It sets up a ministry of truth. That's not what it's called. It's another government body. What's it called? The Digital Safety Commission of Canada, to kind of oversee some of these decisions. And it allows people to be arrested for pre-crime. I get it. These precogs are Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, and Arif Virani. They can be put under house arrest. There's a peace bond that can be applied. There is potential charges for life, but we'll get into that. So let's just take a look at some of these videos that we've got here. I'm spooling up a bunch of things because there's just way too much going on with this bill. And it's really what we seem to be able to expect from this current government. They just keep seeming to dig deeper and deeper. So one famous take on this, I'm going to switch over to X. So this is Greg Wycliffe's post, but so he's posting about the Online Harms Act, Bill C-63. But he's got a video here that's kind of gone viral, and it's of Scott Adams. And Scott Adams is a famous author, but he's most famous for his comic, the Dilbert comic, which everybody knows and loves. He was the creator of the comic strip. So he has his show, which I think is called Real Coffee with Scott Adams. Okay, so I'm going to look at another video later. But this first one, I think it's important to listen to because he is so blown away by what he read in this act, in this bill, that he cannot believe that it's real. And so let's just listen to what he has to say.
Now, here's a story that I swear to God, I can't believe it's true. But, Jordan Peterson was interacting with the story and there was a source was shown. So maybe it's true. Canada is introducing the Harms Act, where the government can put you under house arrest or make you wear an ankle bracelet if someone else believes that you might in the future write something hateful online. What? If somebody thinks you might in the future write something hateful online, Canada can put a bracelet on you and give you house arrest. How can that be true? I'm going to put a stake in this story and say it's not true, that there's something missing. Now, I saw the source, and it looked like an official bill. There's something wrong here. I'm going to say this is too on the nose, and that there's no way Canada is going to punish people for a crime they didn't do. I'm going to say no. Too on the nose. Now, I get that I saw the source. Don't believe it. All right, we'll see.
So that's it. Too on the nose, meaning this is way too dystopian. It cannot possibly be true that a government would actually think of this type of overreach and actually put forward a bill. But they did. Now, there's some other takes on it. Jordan Peterson, he posted this video here, retweeted this or re-X'd this, which is a video of Konstantin Kirsin, I think his name is, a comedian from the UK. And he's just talking about a comparison between Russia and Britain. So let's just have a listen to this.
In Russia last year, 400 people were arrested for things that they said on social media. 400 people in Russia. Obviously, this country is very different. How many people do you think were arrested in Britain for things they said on social media last year?
Go on.
Take a guess.
I have no idea.
3,300.
Really? Arrested for what they'd said on social media?
Yeah.
What sort of things get you arrested?
Well, one example I give in my show is there was a young woman from Liverpool called Chelsea Russell, and people can look this up. Her friend was killed in a car crash, a 19-year-old woman, and she posted the lyrics of his favorite song on her Instagram. And there was a rap song, so the lyrics contained several instances of the N-word. She was arrested, prosecuted, found guilty, given 500 hours of community service and a fine, tagged, and for a year she was under 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. curfew.
Wow.
My goodness.
In Britain.
In Britain.
In 2018.
This is talking about, Jordan Peterson posted this obviously because he's been dealing with Canadian laws for his posts. And they're trying to take away his right to be a psychologist, basically. In fact, if I scroll down a little bit here, there's another post. Under Bill C-63, my criminalization would be a certainty. Don't think this is going unnoticed. He ats Justin Trudeau there. And then he says, you will be accountable. You will be held accountable. And Ezra Levant had said that Jordan Peterson was put through the ringer by the Ontario College of Psychologists because a couple of cranks didn't like some of his tweets. But the new law, C-63, would allow literally anyone to take him to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal for every tweet or YouTube video he publishes, not just in the future, but anything he's done historically that's still available online. Each complaint is free to file. It's not like a civil lawsuit where you have to hire a lawyer and pay a filing fee, etc. The government helps you if you need it. Each complaint can result in a $20,000 fine payable to the complainant and B, a $50,000 fine payable to the government. So it's the Trump treatment, he says. Overwhelm the target with endless nuisance suits that take time and money to fight. Even the complaints are dismissed. You're still at a loss. And it literally, and if literally hundreds of complaints are filed against someone like Professor Peterson, even if only 5% are upheld, that's economically devastating. The point is, this is just over the top, and there's so much about it that's just insane. And I'm using that word a lot on this video, I apologize. And it all spurs from this video that came out from the Justice Minister Arif Virani on February 26th. He spoke on Parliament Hill, just stated what they're doing. It was very much focused on the child abuse pornography side of things. In fact, the two ladies standing behind him are both mothers who have had who shared stories of abuse of their children online via social media. And so that part of it all resonated with everybody with common sense. But then he went to question period at the end. Before I go to that, though, I want to share another side that kind of gives a little bit perspective. And this is from Rupa Subramanya from the Free Press. And she just says, and I might be able to zoom it in a bit there. Yeah, she says, in Canada, proposed legislation would put you under house arrest if the authorities believe you're going to commit a hate crime in the future, even though no crime has been committed or even necessarily planned. In Ireland, a proposed hate crime legislation is likely to pass soon. It would see you in prison for having a meme on your phone that authorities consider hateful, even if you haven't shared it with anyone. In the UK, a future Labour government will almost surely criminalize a broad definition of Islamophobia, which will amount to an anti-Islam blasphemy law. In the US, some prominent legal scholars are now arguing that the First Amendment that protects free expression, rather than being the foundation of a free and open society, is actually a problem because it will allegedly abet the spread of misinformation. We've even taken our freedom in the West for granted for so long that we've become complacent in the name of their definition of the social good. Progressive elites are trying to take away those freedoms. The fight for individual liberties, especially free expression, is now upon us in the West, where free speech is increasingly under attack across the Western world. And this is exactly right. And this is where I want to go to this video, because at the end of this speech that he gave, he opened it up for questions, and there were some good questions posted from the media. So I'm just going to go to a couple of them. And this is what really started raising eyebrows before the legislation was fully able to be read, which we can now do. And there's lawyers, throwing up alerts and red flags because of what the legislation actually states. But here's a question from one of the press that were there.
Can you take us through the thinking of extending the maximum sentence on inciting genocide to life in prison? Is that too much?
What I would say to you is that we put a lot of thought into many aspects of this bill. There's an aspect that deals with the commission that's being created, and there's aspects that deal with the criminal law. We are creating a new freestanding hate crime offense. We are enhancing the penalties, as you mentioned, for the hate crime offenses that exist currently. And we're also ensuring that a peace bond could be procured for somebody who there's a reasonable likelihood will create a hate crimes offense. With respect to genocide, what I know as a lawyer, as minister, and what I've learned from the stakeholders and the experts whom we have consulted is that there is a determination to demonstrate at the highest level that the maximum penalty for a crime such as advocating or promoting genocide should be increased. That penalty, as it stands right now, when you proceed by way of what's called an indictable offense, is 5 years. We are saying that at a maximum, that should be elevated to 25 years. There will remain a range that's available to the judge that is disposing of the case, that is a range that it can reach as high as 25 years. It will depend on the context, but there is no doubt in my mind, particularly now where we are as a country, that people who advocate genocide need to understand that that is a very serious matter, and that is a matter that could be penalized at the highest level.
I'm going to zoom ahead here, but the whole question is, what does this mean? What is it referring to when it says genocide? Who defines that? Can it possibly be just the thought of genocide being posted, of somebody's perception of genocide being posted? This is so up in the air. Now that's up to a 25-year imprisonment for this. But this is another question, and I think it's a related reporter, or no, it's not. It's a different reporter that's asked a follow-up question on this. So let's listen in on that.
I mean, it comes with a potential penalty of life imprisonment. Could you just clarify for us how that would work? I mean, what kind of offences do you envisage could carry that kind of offence? And are you saying that it's no longer an aggravating factor, that it could be a standalone offence? But could you give us some examples of that?
Okay, so in terms of the second part of your question, we're not eliminating the aggravating factor.
Right.
But what we are doing, it's a little bit easier for me in English, what we are doing is creating a freestanding hate crimes offence, which touches any possible delict or crime under the Criminal Code of Canada. And I think what is important about it is that it gives the police and it gives prosecutors more flexibility in terms of contemplating this aspect on the front end of their deliberative exercise, on the front end of how they will conduct their prosecutions. Very importantly, this does not require AG consent. The other hate crimes components, promoting genocide, willful promotion of hatred, things like the anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial offense, require the Attorney General's consent, as does the peace bond that I just mentioned. This provision is something that can be laid it can be initiated on an arrest warrant by a police officer and continued by the Crown, absent the consent of me or a provincial Attorney General. That is very, very important in terms of giving more tools to law enforcement, but secondly, it's important for denouncing what we are seeing right now. And that is critical. Everything you've just heard from people like Carla, everything that I have heard over the last year is that hate is on the rise in this country. We need to be providing more tools, not less, to denounce the hatred that we are seeing, and this will do exactly that.
So to stop it there, so you can see how this opens up wide to include a whole bunch of other things, and then he talks about the peace bond, where what all is going to be included under this umbrella of hate. And there's anonymous, he didn't mention it here, but there's other parts that talk about anonymous reports, that this commission that'll be set up, the digital ombudsman commission that'll be set up, can hear people's reports of potential crimes that somebody might commit, and they could end up under house arrest. So I just want to switch to another podcast with Clyde Do Something. He did an interview here with a lawyer, what's his name? Jeffrey Rath, I think it is. And Jeffrey Rath just started looking more into this legislation to unpack it legally. And so he talks a little bit about it here. Let's just listen in.
We'll get into that in a minute. But I mean, there's so much stuff in here that creates so much liability for internet service companies that I think all of the major ones, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, they're all going to pull out of Canada prior to the next election so that they won't be subject to having as much as 6% of their gross global revenue seized for violations of the act, which is exceptionally broad.
Yeah, so he mentioned there the 6%. Now this is in relation to that pornographic child material. The government wants to claw companies that don't remove it within I think it's 24 hours, a 6% fee of their total global revenue. Like way over the top. Maybe that's what it'll take though to get some of this stuff taken down. That part of it, I think it's over the top, but I something's got to be done. So I almost appreciate that side of things. However, he's correct that there will be social media platforms just pulling out, not because they don't want to take this stuff down, but because some of it is so hard to control. And, with the AI stuff that's generated now, how things can be posted kind of in a clandestine type way. Maybe they don't have access to everything. They can't always be on top of everything. And there can be false accusations made, which could get them in trouble as well. They may just decide we're not going to put up with this. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in this video where he actually goes into, there it is. He pulls up the actual bill here. And this is where it gets good.
An act to enact the Online Harms Act to amend the Criminal Code, the Canadian Human Rights Act, and an act respecting the mandatory reporting of internet child pornography by persons who provide an internet service, and to make consequential and related amendments to other acts. So that in and itself is breathtaking. They're going to be amending the Human Rights Act. They're going to be amending the Criminal Code. The Criminal Code amendments in this thing include provisions people have talked about it being the minority report sections, where people can go into a provincial court judge and say, hey, I think that person might commit an offense under the act. So I want them subject to house arrest. I want them to have to wear an ankle monitor. I want to, impose all of these restrictions on them. I want to seize their firearms. I want to do all of these horrible things to this person because I think they will commit an offense under the act. I mean, that's actually in there. I couldn't believe it at first when I heard, being reported by American media outlets.
Get the precogs.
That provision was in the act. And I'm going, that's the craziest thing that I've ever heard.
So I just wanted to go back to what it actually said there. An act to enact the Online Harms Act to amend the Criminal Code, the Canadian Human Rights Act, and an act respecting the mandatory reporting of internet child pornography by persons who provide an internet service and make consequential and related amendments to other acts. Can we use that word more in one paragraph? That's amazing.
Disbelief, saying that they don't believe it. It's
as a Canadian lawyer,
thinking it's just hyperbole.
As a Canadian lawyer, I was in disbelief today. But it's right in there. It's an amendment to the Criminal Code. There's going to be a new Criminal Code section under hate crimes called section, I'll just hold it up for a second so your viewers can find it. It's section 810.02 sub 1. A person may, with the Attorney General's consent, lay in information before a provincial court judge if the person fears on reasonable grounds the other person will commit. So it's not even has committed or did commit. It's like if somebody, fears on reasonable grounds that a person might do something, they can go to a judge and get a court order. And damn well the way that COVID unfolded, that, the people getting these types of orders are going to be Karens that want to teach the Chris Scotts of the world a lesson, where people that, that want to have, people, in the run up to the next election that are effectively criticizing, Justin Trudeau for various things that he's doing, being taught a lesson and being put under house arrest.
I've kept this page up because I wanted to get to part 6 of that one, of that provision that you said. It says the provincial court judge may add a reasonable condition to the recognize that the judge considers desirable to secure a good conduct of the defendant, including the conditions that require the defendant to A, wear an electronic monitoring device if the Attorney General makes that request. Like, that's crazy. And this was the one in provision in particular that was brought up with...
No, they've even put into statute form what I refer to as a Tamara Leach provision. Okay, they've got sub F, abstain from communicating directly or indirectly with any person identified in the recognizance, or refrain from going to any place specified in the recognizance except in accordance with the conditions specified in the recognizance that the judge considers necessary. So they could literally, again, put limits on who, and this is somebody that, it hasn't even committed an offense, just somebody who they're afraid might commit an offense. A judge can issue an order saying, oh yeah, you're not allowed to talk to, Clyde Nichols anymore. Or you're not allowed to talk to Jeff Rath anymore. And you can't talk to, whoever, and just start coming out with a list of all of the prohibited people who have been outlawed by the Attorney General from being fit for polite conversation.
So you can see how this could become hugely political, because we already see that in in law. I mean, even with the Rollo Commission and the Emergencies Act, that, and basically any case that the Liberal Party has been involved in where they end up with judges that are in favor of them will allow their crimes to proceed without any kind of retribution. But when it comes to regular people that they disagree with, suddenly the law is laid out to the fullest extent. This can go so far to the left, craziness. So I wanted to get back to Scott Adams because he did a follow-up video on his show, Real Coffee with Scott Adams show on Rumble. And he just addressed this first video that he did and shared a little bit more of his thoughts.
Well, here's something that's not ordinary. And apparently I became a semi-viral clip because I doubted that this could possibly be real. And I still do. Because I can't wrap my head around it. I just can't wrap my head around this could be real. That Canada, so End Wokeness is on the X platform says this. It says Canada is trying to pass a new law that will crack down on hate on the internet and other telecommunications. And the bill would allow judges to sentence a person to life in prison for advocating genocide in words. So if you went on Twitter and said everybody in some category should be killed, you would go to jail for life for your opinion. Now, I think you're a very bad person if you think everyone should be killed. But let's game this out a little bit. So let's say that you say that the situation in Gaza is a genocide. Now, I'm not going to agree or disagree. I'll say, for example, that Erdogan from Turkey says it's approaching a genocide or is a genocide. And a lot of commentators are calling it a genocide. Again, not my opinion. I'm not giving you any opinion on that. I'm just describing it. So suppose we get to the point where it's a common opinion that what's happening in Gaza, let's say it's a common opinion in Canada, hypothetically, that whatever's happening at some point starts to look like a genocide. And people start using that word. And then what happens, let's game it a little bit further. If somebody goes on and says,
You're already using that word,
goes on social media and says, I think what the Israeli military is doing is exactly right because, in my opinion, let's say it saves more lives later or there was nothing else you could do. Whatever the opinion is. Again, not my opinion. I'm giving you some examples. Would you be very close at that point to have advocated genocide? Because other people, including the head of Turkey, have said this thing's a genocide, and then you just said you're in favor of it. You don't have to use the word genocide. Apparently, you just have to be in favor of it on social media. Now, did I just describe a case where everybody who said a pro-Israeli thing could be sentenced to life in prison? I think so.
Yeah, that's the problem. And this, I don't think this would ever pass. I really hope not. I just don't think it could ever make it. It's only on the first reading. It has to go through 2 more readings in the House of Commons, and then it goes to the Senate. It's not going to pass. Not as it is, anyways. I couldn't fathom it passing, but stranger things have happened, right? Some of these other bills have passed. The Conservatives right now do not have enough voice in the House with the coalition of the Liberals and the NDP working together. And often there's some bloc people that side with them on different issues. So they don't have enough seats to stop these things. When it gets to the Senate, it's more of an even keel vote, although I think the Liberals are the majority in the Senate. It's possible that it passes, except there's some more common sense Liberals in the Senate. So it's possible that it could. This goes both ways, and this word genocide gets thrown around in all types of different circumstances. Including in the trans, activists vocal wording of people that disagree with some of the trans agenda, that's a type of genocide that leads to harm. Where does this stop? That is the question. I mentioned earlier that there's a backhanded way that this might actually be anti-woke in the future. Comes from another section of this bill, and it was brought up in some questioning shortly after the announcement with an interview on CTV with the Justice Minister, Arif Virani. He responded to some of the questions that were presented, and one of them kind of brought up, what exactly, how this would actually play out, how some of these rules would play out. So let's listen in here to this little question period.
Latter category that you were explaining there, I'm thinking, as a parent and all the parents who are watching tonight, if you are worried about, for example, your kid having mental health issues and then seeing on their algorithm things that substantiate that point of view, what exactly, if it comes into effect, will this legislation do to address those concerns?
Well, I'm also a parent, Vashi, of two boys that now want to move from a flip phone to a smartphone. And I'm actually petrified of the dangers that lurk on the internet. And I'm also troubled by the simple fact that there are more rules and regulations about the Lego in our basement for my two boys than there are for the most dangerous toy in our house and the most dangerous toy in every house in this country, which is the screens that kids are on and the internet that is behind those screens. We're taking an active step to address the concerns of parents like me and grandparents who have grandchildren around the country. And what we are doing is we are entrenching a duty to protect children in legislation. We are entrenching rules which would say that when there's harmful content that includes the abuse and the sexual exploitation of a child, that material must come down. We are saying that harmful content includes material that would be used to bully a child, or material that would be used to induce a child to self-harm, to engage in acts of bulimia, or incredibly to actually commit things such as harmful acts to their body, like suicide.
So here is the other side of this, and this is where I think it's going to slant. Right now it'll slant in a woke direction. It can easily slant in an anti-woke direction because of the realization that's happening right now with detransitioning children and the harm that transitioning in the transgender community, especially with children, has been causing to children who often have mental, psychological issues, and they're kind of dealing through that, and then they online get almost brought into a cult-like community in the trans community where they're pushed and pressured in a direction that is seen as healthy for them to help them with their issues like autism, and there's all types of different things that are found within that community where they're in a weak state. They end up harming themselves, going on puberty blockers and hormone control and even surgery that leaves them permanently sterilized or harmed in psychological ways, etc., and more suicidal. There's the suicide rates that are being brought up, or the solution that they thought it would generate, and actually end up in a deeper depression and more likely to off themselves because of the harm that's been caused. So that's the flip side of this. It can go anti-woke. Is the trans community aware of this? Somebody's going to say that there's somebody on TikTok doing something with kids that's harming them, and that this is a crime, that a judge could rule to do the same thing in the opposite direction for that. So that's just an interesting sideline to this. So where do we go from here? Canadians need to stand up. We need to do something, and we have the right and responsibility to do that. As a Christian, we can pray for our government. We can also take stands and make our voices heard. This is a good thing to do. So I'm going to share a letter submission form that you can use to submit to your MP specifically about this. It gives you a template that you can send to them to make it easy to send and make your voices heard. But before I do that, I just want to listen to an interview. This is with Justin Trudeau on a podcast with Ryan Jesperson, talking about the role of the government and legislating media and controlling media. And it gives some interesting insights into the perspective of this government, which should raise some eyebrows and hairs on your neck.
But to what extent does government get involved here, and what are you prepared to do?
See, that's the big trick and the really, really tricky question right now, because there is out there a deliberate undermining of mainstream media. There are the conspiracy theorists, there are the social media drivers who are trying to do everything they can to keep people in their little filter bubbles, to prevent people from actually agreeing on a common set of facts, the way, you know, the CBC and CTV, when they were our only sources of news, you know, used to project across the country, at least a common.
You catch the projection there where he says that the CBC, CTV, these social podcast platforms are creating a bubble of information that's taking people out of the CBC, CTV, etc's common understanding of everything. So he's projecting exactly the problem is that we right now have a government-funded media that creates a bubble of information that is propaganda. It has been common information for a long time in Canada, but now there's other influential media sources, perhaps more powerful because a lot of times it's just real people on the ground. For example, the convoy, there were people live streaming what's actually happening at the Freedom Convoy, and then there's mainstream media saying something totally different is going on there. And people realized there was a bifurcation of what truth is, that this is fake news, it's propaganda pushed by the government, and this is the problem. So what he's saying is actually a projection of what has been happening already in Canada with the mainstream media, and the government wants to stop the other media sources. And that's basically what he's saying out loud here. It's just interesting. Now, obviously, that's not the full story. He mentions later that he wants to support some other forms of media, but of course that support will involve the government's control of that media in some way. It's just that's how it works. So I'll leave you with that and switch over to the Canadian Constitution Foundation. Let me move me out of the way here. This is a form, I'll link it in the description on this video, that you can go to write to your MP. I recommend that everybody do that, and hopefully we can save Canada from the brink. There's a turning that's happening. You can see it in all the polls. People are waking up and saying, this has gone too far. What's become of our country? We're losing our heritage. We are falling apart at the seams. We're going deeper into totalitarianism and communist tyranny. Can we save Canada? Yes, we can. Let's pray for Canada. People, pray for Canada. Pray for our leaders. Pray for Justin Trudeau. It's a good thing to do. Pray for change of heart. Pray for direction. Pray for divine wisdom. Pray for Canada in general, for revival. That's what we need. Thanks for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends. And yeah, be blessed, everybody.
I was about yay high when Yahweh told me to run it. Only a matter of time before my mob need a hit and 100. I swore a sign, he told me to pay more attention, he already done it.